I don't know if they got the revised agenda, but the public is at the end.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to the special meeting of the Oakland Mayor and Council. It's July 6, 2022, 6 p.m. We're televised, so we can start. Roll call.
Mayor Schwager.
Here.
Councilman Kamala.
Here.
Councilman McCann.
Here.
Councilman Pignatelli. Councilman Saliani.
Here.
Councilman Sosinski.
Here.
Councilman Talamini.
Here.
Does anybody know if Pat's coming?
No, I didn't hear from
Anybody? Anybody?
I just sent him a text. I haven't seen anything come back yet.
His car, when I passed his house, I looked to see if the car is still there, so I know I'm still on time, but, no. Before we begin, please, even though it's a special meeting and it's going to be a presentation, so please look at your cell phones and mute them, or turn them off, if you can do that. And also, please refrain from texting, especially up here, because that could be misconstrued as a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. It's also very disturbing and very annoying and distracting. So please refrain from texting and put your cell phones on mute. This meeting is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Law, duly announced, advertised and posted in the municipal building. The meeting will adjourn at 10 p.m. unless a majority of the council members that are present vote to extend the time. At this time, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Remain standing for a moment of silence, and also prayers and best wishes to those who lost people in Highlands, Illinois. I'm taking it very personally. My son lives in the next town over. When we visited Chicago, we've been to Highland Park, and it's a beautiful downtown. Every time I look at that downtown, I think of what a downtown would look like, a beautiful downtown with planters and pavers and stores, little gift shops, restaurants, people walking, milling around, and then this tragedy happened. So please, your prayers and good wishes to those people who lost family members, lost friends, and those who are still recovering from injuries. Thank you. Be seated. And it is apropos that we're discussing a downtown revitalization, and I keep thinking about how beautiful Highland Park is. It's just a beautiful town. The original agenda had the public comment before the discussion and before the presentation. And I was talking to Richard, our borough administrator, and our borough clerk, and said it really makes more sense to have the comments after the presentation, because then you can take notes if you want during the presentation. I see the pen and pencil already going, Kevin. And we invite everyone to speak, give their opinions. We want to hear your suggestions. And I'm very excited. We have some representation from the Community of Commerce, hopefully at some point, Chamber of Commerce. And thank you for the business people coming, and thank you for residents. And if you're watching on television, please, we'd love to hear your feedback after the meeting. And at this time, Steve Leiden, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. You said 10 o'clock, Mayor. If I'm still talking at 10 o'clock.
No, we always give you a minimum amount of time. You know that at the planning board. You are given a set period of time, and you always come through.
I hope to do that again today.
You will.
So good evening. I am here to do a PowerPoint.
Just if you could tell everybody who you are, because we know who you are, but a lot of people in the audience and watching on television do not know who you are.
Sure. I'm Steve Leiden. I'm the borough planner. I've been employed with Burgess Associates for the last 20 some odd years. I'm a professional planner, have been licensed for more years than I'll admit on television, and I've been working with the borough for probably 15 years or so.
And before me.
So it's been a while. And I've been asked to give this presentation today. And this is a little outside our normal realm, because we usually deal with planning. usually looking at how properties could be developed. In this case, it's really more of an economic development action because the properties are already there. And we're also talking about investments and tax exceptions and tax abatements. So it's a little bit different. Where it comes from is a real brief background. New Jersey has recognized the need for coordinated action to ameliorate conditions of deterioration. And this is not something limited to Oakland or Bergen County, but it's statewide. And it's been going on for probably since right after World War II. And then there was a major change in the statutes in '92. An examination of on-the-ground conditions is necessary to open up the toolbox that the state has provided. And an area in need of redevelopment designation is a tool local government can use to improve local economic conditions. And that's really what the focus of this is. Why are we here? Well, if you look back through master plans, Oakland has a long-standing municipal concern over the desire to improve both the physical and the visual identity of the commercial core. And that's in order to let the borough achieve its full potential. Why does Oakland and why is its downtown maybe not achieve its full potential? Well, there are many complex reasons for the conditions along Round Pole Valley Road. What this area in need of designation for rehabilitation does, it offers Oakland another approach to assist businesses and the business community to achieve a fuller potential. And I think the very next slide is a definition of rehabilitation. And I took this from the statute. And because we're talking about an area in need of rehabilitation, I thought probably a good place to start is what the definition of rehabilitation is. And if you look at this, it's a very broad definition. And any undertaking or an undertaking by means of extensive repair, reconstruction, or renovation of existing structures. So we're not talking about new development, we're talking about existing structures with or without the introduction of new construction or the enlargement of existing structures. So in many cases, we're talking about renovations, modernizations, physical improvements to the infrastructure of a building in any area that has been determined to be in need of rehabilitation or redevelopment to eliminate substandard structural or housing conditions and arrest the deterioration of that area. So the goal is to eliminate substandard conditions. And I think no matter where you may be with planning and development issues, I think everyone can agree that elimination of substandard conditions is a good thing. Next, if you could, Mike. So the benefits of the act to the community, and I think the purpose of the act is a good introduction to permit municipalities the greatest flexibility. When does the state government talk about greatest flexibility possible within constitutional limitations to address problems of deterioration and decay? And I think within constitutional limitations is a key phrase in here for two reasons. One, this is an ordinance, or this is an approach, it's not an ordinance, it's an approach to granting tax exemptions and tax abatements. So whenever the public purse is at issue, you've got to be careful that constitutional and budgetary frameworks and gutters are followed. But also, the other thing I think, the other reason constitutional limitations is in here is we are not talking about taking property. We're not talking about taking property in any fashion whatsoever. In fact, under an area in need of rehabilitation, that's not even a potential. It's completely off the table. So if the borough were to go ahead and declare the study area, or a portion of the study area, which we'll get to in a second, as an area in need of rehabilitation, it will certainly not lead to any eminent domain action by the borough or the county or the state. Because under the authority given to the borough, if such a designation is made, that's not one of them. You just don't have the ability to do that. What it does, it allows for short-term tax exemptions and abatements. And that's through a whole other statute. Because again, when in New Jersey, when you're talking about tax dollars, there's a lot of people looking over shoulders, and a lot of people trying to make sure that the public is getting the fair return on tax dollars. So a municipality cannot take property by eminent domain in an area in need of rehabilitation. But what the governing body can do by using another act is it can provide short-term tax exemptions and abatements. And without going into too much detail on taxes, exceptions relate to properties and abatements relate to improvements. And now we've probably exhausted my understanding of taxes in New Jersey, except they're due quarterly in, I think, August, right? So, and what's also important is there are many steps to this whole process. This is almost an introductory one, if not the introductory one. And once we go through this process, if the borough chooses to, the whole idea of offering tax exemptions requires a whole nother process, which is complex and beyond the scope of this, this presentation. I only bring that to the attention of the council so you don't think that by going down this route of area in need of rehabilitation, you might be opening up the doors to some sort of tax dollar giveaway. This on its own can't do that because it takes a whole nother approach and a whole nother set of state statutes to provide those short-term tax exemptions and abatements. That's why the third point on this the slide says it's Oakland's option. It's not necessarily mandatory. One doesn't follow the other. And then the abatements and exemptions of taxes are not to exceed 5 years in length. This is designed to get property owners, get businesses to invest in their property, and then give give property owners and businesses exemptions or abatements and get that money back to them quickly. So it's for a 5-year process. Also, I think the idea for being short-term is the economic health of the community. It's easier to track and follow and budget if you're talking about a 5-year program. So it's a short-term exemption to sort of spur additional investments in your downtown. Next one. Limitations on the role of the borough. Oakland is neither studying nor contemplating redevelopment. This is, and what we've been asked to do is do a study for rehabilitation. There are really two different pathways under that the borough could follow. We've been asked to approach it from a rehabilitation perspective. Use of eminent domain is not authorized nor possible under rehabilitation. There's simply no authority for allowing the taking of private property under rehabilitation. It's a voluntary process where property owners may choose to seek tax exemptions or tax abatements for their properties, but it's one they need to apply for if in fact the borough is going to make that as an option. So this is really an economic development tool chest where the downtown will continue to be the commercial core. We're not changing uses. We're not doing anything of that. We're just trying to, and by saying we, I mean the borough, is trying to provide economic benefits to property owners and developers and owners of properties in order to encourage investment in those buildings and in those properties. And again, this is an early step. So the map that's on the screen in front of you gives you an idea of what we're talking about and where we're talking about and some of the zoning parameters that are involved. And trust me, it looked a lot better in the report than it does on the screen. We seem to have distorted it to almost beyond reading. But if you look at the lower portion of the screen, you'll see Ramapo Valley Road highlighted, and you can sort of follow that up and around towards the north arrow. So that obviously is a commercial core of the borough. The dark gold lines are the study area boundaries. So the one on the lower portion would be Copper Tree Mall, for instance. Easy enough to follow. The various colors, which are more confusing than anything else, are to represent the different zones in the area. And there have been a number of different zones in the area, and that may have been, one of the reasons why it's developed in such a manner. Some of the buildings date back to before we had zoning. Some of them date back to an older zone. And then the Walgreens Center, which is probably the newest commercial development along Ramapo Valley Road, is under more modern standards. So there have been a number of different zones adopted in the area, and they've all been really designed to try to foster and encourage economic development along Ramapo Valley Road and properties that are in close proximity to it. So this doesn't change the zoning. The zoning would stay in place, but this would provide those tax exemptions and tax abatements to try to encourage and spur investment in the downtown area. And I apologize for the way that slide works. Maybe we should get rid of it and take it off the screen. So description of the study area, since you couldn't understand that from the map we provided, it includes properties along Ramapo Valley Road from Franklin Avenue south to Oak Street to, I guess that's called the Morse Shopping Center on one side and Ponds Reformed Church on the other. We included both east and west sides of Ramapo Valley Road. In total, there are 48 properties in the study area, and the study area is a little bit larger than 45 acres or so. Here's some findings that jumped out as we looked at the study area. Study area lots are typically pretty small for commercial development, where you try to create a building and some parking area and have some nice property, sections to entice people in. Almost 60% of the properties are under half acre in size. That's pretty small by modern standards. And assessments reflect that. Over 40% of the properties in town, in that study area, have assessments of less than $750,000. And these are the current figures from the recent reassessment that the borough went through. So here we are in 2022, and over 40% have a total assessment of less than $750,000. That's fairly low. And then 5 additional properties are between $751,000 and $1 million. So I don't pretend to be an economist, but to me, it suggests that the properties are not achieving their full potential, and it's reflected in the total assessments that the borough has assigned. Why is that important? Well, it shows that the tax dollars the borough might also otherwise achieve aren't being achieved, and it shows that, I think, in this case, the full potential of the street is not being recognized. And I think the designation as an area in need of rehabilitation might be able to bring up those assessments a fairly good number, a fairly good way. So I think there's potential. The next couple of pages I don't want to spend too much time on. They're just various pictures of downtown. You'll notice a lot of them are one story. We do have a service station in town. Personally, I think having a service station in the center of town is never a good idea. This photo I selected because of the lack of landscaping and the fact that the parking lot is almost full. So that shows that there are people who want to shop in town. It shows that if given opportunities, more people could probably shop in town. It also shows the building in the back, if you squint, I guess. It's an older building. It could use some improvement. But even with the condition of the building, we're still getting a fairly good parking lot utilization. So that tells me there is potential. The next thing I want to talk about is the act itself. And without getting into legal stuff and taking Mr. Schakowsky's thunder, the act does provide municipalities the authority to declare an area in need of rehabilitation. And the way you can do that, or the times you can do that, is if certain statutory criteria are present in that study area. And then if the municipality does have those criteria present and the municipality wants to further do it, you can provide tax advantages to designated areas. And the designated area is a study area. There are, on this slide, there are 6 factors that are enumerated in the statute. Since there's only 6, I'll go through them quickly. Structures are in a deteriorated or substandard condition. More than half of the dwellings are at least 50 years old, and some board members may be surprised to know there's about maybe about 10 different dwellings or apartments in this area, so there are some dwellings. There's a pattern of vacancy, abandonment, or underutilization of properties. There's persistent shortage of property tax payments on properties in the study area. Environmental contamination is discouraging improvements and investments in the area. And the last one is a majority of water and sewer infrastructure is at least 50 years old and in need of repair or substantial maintenance. Now, with these 6, you don't have to have all 6, you don't have to have 4 out of 6. One feature alone would enable the borough to declare an area in need of rehabilitation. On the next page are our findings, and we found 6 of the 6 criteria, 3 are present in the study area. 1, over half of the study area dwellings are over 50 years or greater in age. We believe they all are. There's a significant number of study area structures are in a deteriorated or substandard condition. And lastly, the majority of the study area water system is over 50 years old and in need of repair. So based on those findings being present in the study area, our recommendation to the mayor and council, to the governing body, is that the conditions in the study area are present that could empower Oakland to declare the study area an area in need of rehabilitation. And furthermore, and adopt a resolution to that, send it to the planning board, and get planning board recommendations. If the recommendation is adopted by the governing body, there'd be a multi-step process to implementation where the governing body, if you want to, could provide for tax exemptions and tax abatements down the road. But this is really sort of the key jumping off point to achieve those other benefits. So, Mayor, I said I'd be short, 12 minutes, 15 minutes.
That was very good, very
So
impressive.
I tried to meet that deadline.
You'll make it up at the next planning board meeting.
I promise you I won't. So if council people have any, or the mayor have any
I will
questions?
hear from the council first, and then, or we want to hear from the audience first. Council's pleasure.
I don't know, maybe we keep it up here first and then.
All right,
So,
floor's open.
So is this just open to the businesses in that area, or are there some residential? So you said dwellings, I mean, that's what you're meaning, it's residential?
Yes, there are residentials, and those residential property owners or the property owner of some apartments could take advantage of tax exemptions and tax abatements to renovate and improve those dwelling units, whether they're apartments or dwellings. Yes, would be available to them.
Are these abatements transferable to sale of property if someone starts the process and then backs out and you already applied for your abatement? If we sell the property, those are they transferable?
I never thought of that question,
Good question.
but I think they are. I think those are transferable assets, and they could be transferred.
I'm just assuming if you're going to do this, people are coming and develop and resell, right? So I'm just curious on how long it lasts.
Why did you stop at Oak Street?
First of all, when you're doing things like this, I believe it's good to start small.
Okay.
We haven't had history of doing this. Also, there's a certain amount of buyer trust or resident trust you need to gather. And I think starting small in a defined area, and in fact, I was wondering if we should have made it from the railroad further south maybe, but we went to Franklin, is a good way for the borough to prove it works,
Okay, thank you.
if you want to go that way.
I have a question. On one of the pictures, you had the strip mall. You said that every business has the opportunity to be in it. So like say a couple of the businesses go for it and improve it, but then this one business doesn't. How does that work? Because it's going to look really nice and then it's going to look horrible and then really nice again.
Well, that could happen. Well, one thing, the property owner may want to take advantage of the tax abatements and tax exemptions. So in that case, you would suspect he or she would improve all of their spaces.
Okay.
If, for whatever reason, the property owner chose not to participate, and again, I'm going to assume that tax exemptions and tax abatements somewhere down the road are agreed to by the governing body, so they are available. If, let's say, 3 out of 7 or 8 or 9 business owners decided to use that to, said, okay, the property owner's not going to do it, I'm going to step up to the plate, I'm going to be here a long time, I've got a long-term lease, I'm going to make those improvements and gather the tax benefits. You're going to find that, I think, that rising tide will lift all boats, and if they have much better looking spaces, and it's reflected in customer turnover and foot traffic, I think you'll see the other ones saying, gee, maybe it's time we do something. So I think that issue would take care of itself in short order.
Okay.
I think there'll also be pressure on the landowner, the property owner to do something.
2 questions, sorry about that. One, is there a minimum investment to do this?
No.
So,
No, there's-
And obviously, it's been around 50 years, this law.
Oh, it's been around probably closer to 70.
Okay, so with that, you might have done yet, have you compared when other towns like Oakland have put something in place, what has happened? Has there been a success rate? If you haven't gotten that far, I understand. I'm just curious if someone like Oakland has done this, and what was their success rate?
Yeah, there have been. What happened in '92, the state really redid a lot of these ordinances, statutes rather, and offered different tools in the tool chest. And there has been a lot of activity in various states and various municipalities throughout the state where they have done things. I think Maplewood is a big user of redevelopment, rehabilitation statutes to improve that community. So there have been municipalities that have done it. I haven't gone into a situation where I've ever looked at comparing the taxes you forgo for those 5 years versus recapture later on. That would be an interesting exercise beyond my abilities.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I have a question. You mentioned shopping center. Ed Decker is the owner of the shopping center. I don't know what was it called. It was called
Seals?
Seals, thank you. Right. And you know, I've been pestering him about that fence, that metal grating that I can't stand, and he promised me we would work on possibly doing landscaping. Does this fall under landscaping, fall under this? Exterior, let's put it exterior only.
Well, if we look back at that definition, that's the rehabilitation, extensive repair, reconstruction, or renovation of existing structures. I suspect you're probably not looking at doing landscaping. I suspect, and I don't know for sure, something like septic improvements.
But what
might
if he was working to remove that metal fence? It's not a metal, it's not a fence. What is it? Guardrail, that's what it is.
Yeah,
The
metal
one that's all
guardrail.
rusty and bent. And decided to put something in its place, plantings. This would not help.
Mayor, I believe the way it works is it would need to be some improvement that would trigger an added assessment.
Would make it look prettier.
Right, but there's certain improvements there that you can make on your own home that aren't going to trigger an added assessment, other ones that will. I think it's the same thing here. If it's something where you need building permits, something that winds up going from the construction office up to the assessment office for an added assessment, the property owner would be able to apply to have that increase in value, abated for 5 years.
So it's the owner of the shopping center, because all those businesses are tenants.
Correct, it has to be the property owner,
Well, I think businesses can do it as well.
but they're not paying property taxes.
They're not gonna
They
pay the
aren't.
taxes, it comes from the landlord,
Right.
who the assessment may go down to the tenant and increase his rent, but he's not paying taxes to the borough.
Right, but there would need to be some sort of an arrangement under that circumstance where the tenant gets some sort of rent relief from the landowner in exchange for making improvements to the landowner's building.
But we can't force that, can we?
No, we can't.
It has to be
That-
between the
that
tenant
could-
and the
That can be a
landlord.
private deal, yes. And it is a capital improvement to the property that we're looking for, not just removal of an ugly guardrail.
Not just the guardrail, eventually it's gonna come down.
Eventually it will.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
It is my fault.
Just a couple questions, just a couple comments also. Obviously, planning board's been pretty busy lately working on the streetscape plan. The council has asked the planning board to start coming up with architectural guidelines so we can try and unify what the downtown would look like, because now we got everything from 1800s, 1900s, 1950s, 1960s, 70s, all the way up, and there's no uniformity to the downtown area. And also, along with that, we're also looking at improving Bush Plaza as you come right down Yorkville Avenue coming into town. So my question to you is, this is really, we're just really building a foundation right now to get the town moving in the right direction with all these different programs, so that if and when, I'm not gonna say the other word, but when things start moving downtown, we're ahead of this and we have a bit of control to unify this down. Could you just expand a little bit on how the architecture would work in your mind when the planning board comes back? I think that's a very important key point to this.
Sure, and I think the broad picture that you just mentioned, Councilman, is key to it as well. I believe designating the study area, if the council does that, as an area in need of rehabilitation, is really forming a partnership
Right.
with the business community. In exchange for you making improvements, capital improvements to your building and maybe doing expansions, we, the borough, would give some tax advantages for a discrete number of years. That's talking about the private realm, and that's certainly important. In fact, it's probably the most important part of it. But what the planning board has been looking at is trying to improve the public realm, where people walk, where people are walking down and they finish a soda, that there's an attractive trash receptacle nearby, they can dispose of it or recycle it, where the sidewalks are level, where they're uniform. So as you walk from property to property, there's a continuity of sidewalks. We're trying to get some of the wires taken down from the pole that the various utility companies have just deactivated and left there. So what we're trying to do is change the dynamic of the downtown, and more importantly than the dynamic, the way it functions. And clearly, the role of the government in how businesses are maintained and operated is limited, typically. And the role of the property owner in improving the streetscape is limited. Yeah, we may have them change a curb or sidewalk when it's a tripping hazard, but it's limited. And what this does now is I think it provides an incentive to the property owners to improve their buildings, which, as you say, may be 100 years old, bring them up to date, make them modern and inviting, and at the same time, the borough is there with some tax abatements, and at the same time, with some new design criteria for the public realm. So what it does is, if there's multiple approaches to having an attractive, vibrant, economically viable downtown, I think Oakland is trying to take action on all of those different realms, with the idea that at the end of the day, when everyone is sitting back and taking a breath, the downtown has been transformed.
So that raises a couple of follow-up questions. If we were to adopt this ordinance after sending it down to the planning board, does one put a time limit on this for, or is it, or it doesn't have a sunset? So in other words, if you write the ordinance, it's good for 5 years, 10 years, not the taxpayer piece, but how long this ordinance sits on the books?
I think it's 10 years for I think the tax purpose, the tax law, the 5-year tax exemption
Right.
abatement law, I think you have to do that within 10 years. I think it sunsets after 10.
So the ordinance sunsets after 10 years.
Right, but it can be renewed.
So it can be reduced. So if a business owner doesn't opt in the first cut, they can come back at the next cut. How many times can a business owner take advantage of this program?
That's another question I haven't thought of. I would,
Are you writing, Nick, you taking notes, Richard?
Yeah, and I believe that's something that can probably be specified in the ordinance.
So we'd have to define that by ordinance.
I think so. I think that's something we would look at doing.
but I'm sure Mr. Coons is right, but when you think about it, the goal here is to incentivize
Correct.
improvements downtown. So if property owner A, I won't mention any names, next year takes advantage of this, and the borough does do the tax exemption and tax abatement, and they get a tax abatement for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, he looks back at his P&L statement and says, you know what, this worked out pretty well, I'm ready for round two. I think at that time, the borough, well, I'm not gonna guess what's gonna happen in 5 years, but assuming things go along as we kind of expect them to, I think the borough would be happy to be a partner in round two as well.
Listen, I agree completely. Like you said, you couldn't put any better. This is a public-private partnership, and we want to do what we can do to make it easier for the businesses to improve on their properties, thereby improving the downtown, while the borough also takes care of our part with sidewalks and the park and everything else like that. So it truly is a partnership.
And things certainly weren't invented overnight, so if a developer, especially a larger property, does part of it now, let's say next year, and a couple of years later does another part, I don't think you'd have to wait the 5 years. I think you could probably structure it so that the first 5 year, the first abatement would cover A, B, and C, and the second one does, 1, 2, and 3. So I think
And-
there is flexibility in the program. I'm sorry, Mayor.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished.
Just one other question. So just process-wise, so for the public to understand also, so at this point, we get this, we adopt a resolution at the next meeting, and it goes for the planning board for review, correct?
Correct, they have 45 days.
45 days, okay.
And then the planning board gets to make recommendations as to what they think of the program, what they think of the particular details, like the study area. Maybe it's too small, maybe it's too large, I don't know. And then the borough would be after those 45 days expire, or receipt of the planning board recommendations, would be in a position to make such a designation, that the area is in need of rehabilitation.
Okay, so now I just want to take this and backstop with this master plan just a little bit. So if we put this in place, that means our master plan also has to reflect the fact architectural standards are in place, guidelines for what, we're looking to do, what it's going to look and feel like. So all these other pieces, parts have to be in place before we actually execute on the ordinance, correct?
I think there's opportunity to break it out. I said earlier that it's all encompassing, but I think there are many different parts, and those can happen according to mayor and council schedule, according to the planning board schedule, according to the schedule of the business community. The planning board is probably going to be in a position to make recommendations on,
You talking about our committee?
no, I think the planning board.
No, our committee on the planning board.
Yeah, and then the planning board itself, because the way that's going to work, there's a subcommittee that has been formed on the planning
For a
board.
very long time.
Yes,
Actually, I think it started with Lou Levy and then with Grant.
I believe you're right. And then COVID hit, and things kind of came to a grinding halt. So that subcommittee is getting very close to making recommendations to the planning board, which will then forward those recommendations to the mayor and council.
So,
for it to be
and we
addressed.
talked about that the streetscape plan, we could only enforce it for new development.
Yes,
So this would be almost like a partnership, and in other words, it's not new development, so we're giving them an incentive to be a part of what we're requiring new development to do.
if there was one word I would use for this whole study need,
That would
this
be?
area in need of rehabilitation, it would be incentive.
Okay.
It's to incentivize developers, property owners, tenants to improve the buildings they're on,
Right.
or in.
Anybody else? So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to open to the public.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We invite comments, suggestions, questions, whatever.
Thank you.
Please, come up, say your name, your affiliation, and we'd love to hear from you.
Sure, Jim Given for Woodcrest. I have a question. I know you had a master plan, and the incentive there was to change and revitalize. And I love the idea of working, with the public and the business owners. But what I understand to be the case is that was holding the business owners up was the sewer septic situation. Now, have you come up with the planners? Is there a new sewer septic solution that will, because they don't want to spend the money on the buildings because of the sewer septic situation.
Right.
They can't expand, they can't do a lot of things. So maybe you can expand on that and help us understand why they would do that if that's not going to be
Well, we're
solved.
waiting for our next meeting with Northwest Bergen Utilities Authority.
Right, and I can tell you that, we all.
We are
as you
starting.
know-
First, we had to clean up the sewer service areas, the 3 that we have. And then from there, we're working with Northwest.
Right, we have our wastewater management plan amendment down in Trenton with the DEP. that would expand the sewer service areas to include the downtown. And as the mayor indicated, there will be an agreement with the Regional Sewerage Authority to provide investment to build out the transmission system. But we don't have a firm date on when the DEP is going to move forward with the approval process
Right.
for the wastewater management
And
plan.
we can't do that, but what was happening on 202, where everybody thought, oh, we're getting sewers finally, it's because we're doing now the 3 sewage service area, pumping stations.
Treatment plants.
Right. The treatment plants, we're giving it, we're taking it away and giving it to Northwest. And so the lines are being put in, and that's the start.
Mr. Gibbons, just to talk to your point, I think it's important that, you know, as we're looking forward to sewers, okay, I think us being proactive by putting these programs in place and looking at the downtown and the parks and incentivizing the business owners, if and when that does take place, at least this framework is in place, so now the business owners can move very quickly. Taking the sewers out of it, it still provides an opportunity and a vehicle for the business owners to, right now, start doing improvements on their property to try and develop that downtown, so that it brings everybody's, you know, tax, you know, it's a good thing for the town, the community, the business owners. There's no downside to doing this. So, I mean, this is just the beginning of a process. And this is really the foundation that we're putting together now. And this will have ramifications 10, 20, 30 years down the road by taking the moves that we're doing right now.
Does the process you're talking about, the sewage and septic, is that like 1 year, 5 year, 10 years? And then you're setting this up to work in conjunction with that, so that it makes it more attractive to the business owner to do the improvements? Again, because what I understand is they don't want to do any, after talking to a bunch of business owners, they don't want to do any improvements until they see that being
We'll
solved.
know more once we get that meeting going and we hear from Trenton. Right now, the whip is down in Trenton. We've been pushing them, really pestering them. We have the 3 plants.
They say they've been hearing this for 15 years.
But you know what? We're getting closer to the end than the beginning. It's getting there.
So,
I am telling you, that's my
That's what
goal.
they keep
It's
telling
getting
us.
there.
Yeah,
It's getting there.
I think it's really important to just, you know, footnote the fact.
I'm not giving up.
No, we'd all like to see a better downtown, so yeah.
I mean, I think it's an important footnote to put in there, and the fact that the 3 plants are coming offline and they are going to be tied into Northwest Borough. So you're finally seeing this incipient stage of something starting, and hopefully then the DEP can get behind the rest of it and move the larger plant forward. But this is the first time there's actually movement taking place, taking plants offline. And this is a good thing.
Because I've talked to the shopping center owner that you talked about. He wants to build up and build back and do all kind of
I
things.
mean, the seals, Ed?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, not until that gate goes. He knows that. I'm not letting him do anything. That has to go.
But that's what it's hindered, some of the improvements you're talking about.
The last time we had brought this up, I had mentioned, when I had purchased my home, I had a little dinky deck in the back, and I said to my wife, my wife's like, oh, we should do it. And I said, you know what? I don't want to do anything to that deck because we're not going to be here that long, And if we are going to be here, we're going to knock the deck down. We'll put an addition on, or we're going to move, and it'll be the next guy's problem. And so it was. 15 years later, I still had this dinky deck on the back of my house. I didn't do anything, and it was really at the end. I was like, this is so silly. I should have put the bigger deck on it. Sure, it would have cost money, but it would have looked better. I would have got more use out of it. And then in the end, I ended up putting a big addition on and a nice deck. But in the meantime, I had to put up with this junky deck. So I understand that you don't want to do anything until you have the sewers, but you have to do something, because I really regret that I didn't put the deck on, So
But I think they're limited to the size and things, scope that they can do.
Sure, but
So if they do a partial thing, it doesn't make sense for them to do a partial.
But you have to do something. That's because I got to the point where I couldn't even stand on my deck.
Right.
Was that small?
No, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just telling you what they're telling, what they're saying.
But it's just, so you have to, eventually you have to do something. Yes, we're going to tell you we're gonna get sewers. That's, you know, you have to think positive, you have to, you know, we're doing everything that we can. But also, you have to move forward. You have to live in the moment. You have to, you know, you know.
Most business owners, though, are gonna look, you can say that aesthetics are great, but they're looking at return on investment.
Sure.
If they don't see the return and they say they're gonna put a sunk cost into something that's not gonna realize because the sewers aren't there, they're not gonna do the investment.
It's a fair point, but also, if you're not doing anything, you're staying stagnant in business too, right? So if your fund's deteriorating, Oakland people spend money. We go to other towns to spend money, right? We all do it. So if that money's leaving town, but you're not investing, if you invest, that money might stay in town. So that's just normal course of business. So to me, you have to weigh that as an option as well.
Yeah, I'm not being a dead, you know,
right.
dead horse. I'm just, what they're saying is the hindrance on their investments. Even without what you're doing is incredible as a partnership to them, they would do the investments if they saw that go forward, so,
It's coming.
yeah.
You mark my words.
Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, if no one else wishes to speak, all the people that are at home watching, I invite you to please contact any of us up here, myself, any of the councilmen. We would love to hear from you, your suggestions, your comments, complaints. We would always hear from you, complaints, but please let us know what you're thinking. And with that, I say thank you and motion to close.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you for the guys behind the studio for doing this tonight. Harry?